The chains bit into Valora's wrists as they dragged her through the snow. She had stopped fighting 3 days ago, when the iron manacles had worn her skin raw and her voice had gone hoarse from screaming. Now she moved in numb silence, her bare feet leaving bloody prints on the frozen ground as her uncle's men hauled her toward the stone altar at the center of the clearing. Grimholt. The name alone was enough to make grown wolves whimper. A territory of shadows and cruelty, ruled by an alpha whose reputation for brutality had spread across 7 realms. No wolf entered Grimholt willingly. Those who were brought here rarely left alive, and her own uncle had sold her to them. Valora lifted her head, forcing herself to take in the scene before her. Dozens of wolves ringed the clearing, their eyes gleaming amber in the torchlight. They wore leather and fur, their faces scarred, their postures radiating barely contained violence. At the center of it all, seated on a throne carved from blackened bone, sat the Alpha of Grimholt, Uldren. He was massive. That was her first thought. Shoulders like a mountain range, hands that could crush a skull without effort, a face that might have been handsome once before cruelty had carved its permanent mark into every line. His hair was iron gray, pulled back from a face dominated by pale eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. Those eyes fixed on her now. "This is the girl?" His voice was a rumble of distant thunder. Her uncle Turvin stepped forward, his posture bent with false humility. Valora had never hated anyone the way she hated him in this moment. He had raised her after her parents died, had promised to protect her, had waited until she turned 20 winters old before revealing his true nature. "As promised, Alpha Uldren." Turvin's voice dripped with obsequious greed. "My brother's daughter. Pure bloodline, unmarked by any wolf, worth far more than the debt I owe you." Uldren rose from his bone throne and descended the altar steps with predatory grace. The wolves around the clearing grew utterly still as their alpha approached the bound woman who stood shivering in the snow. He circled her once, twice. His nostrils flared as he scented her, and something flickered in those pale eyes. "She carries old blood," Uldren murmured. "Very old. Where did your family line originate?" "I do not know, Alpha." Turvin spread his hands. "My brother never spoke of our ancestors. We are simply wolves of Sylvain. Nothing special." Uldren's hand shot out and gripped Valora's jaw, forcing her face up toward the torchlight. She glared at him with every ounce of defiance she had left, refusing to show fear even as his claws pressed dimples into her skin. "Nothing special," he repeated, his lips curving into something that was not quite a smile. "I wonder?" His other hand moved to her collar, pulling aside the torn fabric of her dress to expose her left collarbone. The mark. It had been there since birth. A crescent moon, pale silver against her skin, positioned just below the hollow of her throat. Her mother had called it a blessing. Her father had looked at it with something like sorrow in his eyes. Valora had never understood why. Uldren's breath caught. For a single heartbeat, something that looked almost like fear crossed his brutal features. Then it was gone, replaced by a hunger that made Valora's stomach turn. "The blood debt is paid," Uldren announced, releasing her jaw and stepping back. "Take the uncle. Kill him." Turvin's scream of protest was cut short as wolves descended on him. Valora watched without pity as the man who had sold her was dragged into the darkness. His death would not be quick. She found she did not care. "The girl comes with me," Uldren continued. "She is not to be touched by anyone, not to be marked, not to be harmed in any way that leaves permanent damage." His pale eyes swept across his assembled wolves. "She is mine. Anyone who forgets this will be fed to the winter." Rough hands grabbed Vylora's arms and began pulling her toward the fortress that loomed at the edge of the clearing. A structure of black stone and iron spikes. It looked less like a dwelling than a wound in the earth itself. As she was dragged across the threshold, something strange happened. The mark on her collarbone flared with sudden heat. Valora gasped, stumbling as pain radiated across her chest. It felt like a brand being pressed to her skin from the inside, like fire running through her veins, like something vast and ancient waking from a long slumber. And beneath the pain, she felt something else. A presence. Distant but overwhelming. A consciousness so powerful it made her knees buckle. It was searching, hunting, tearing across impossible distances with desperate, furious focus, looking for her. The sensation lasted only a moment before the fortress doors slammed shut behind her, cutting her off from the night sky. The heat in her mark faded to a dull pulse. The presence retreated to the edges of her awareness. But it did not disappear entirely. Somewhere, somehow, something had felt her. And it was coming. 1,000 leagues to the east, in the obsidian tower that crowned the capital of Ethermore, the Alpha King woke screaming. Kaedric had not slept in 3 days, had not eaten in 2. His advisors had begged him to rest, had warned that even an alpha of his power could not sustain himself on fury alone. He had ignored them all. 20 years. For 20 years of this lifetime, he had searched, had sent wolves to every corner of every realm, had offered fortunes, had made threats, and had waged wars against any who hindered his hunt. And for 20 years, he had found nothing. The crescent mark, the silver eyes, the soul he had chased across 3 centuries of reincarnation, always arriving too late, always finding her grave instead of her living breath. 5 lifetimes they had been separated. 5 times he had felt her enter the world, had mobilized everything to reach her, and had come within days or weeks or hours only to discover that death had claimed her first. Illness, accident, murder. Someone was keeping them apart. He had known it for 200 years. Some force, some enemy, some ancient curse that ripped her away before the bond could complete and free them both from this endless cycle. In this lifetime, he had come closer than ever before, had narrowed her location to the Northern Territories, had known she was alive, could feel her heartbeat echoing through the incomplete bond like a distant drum. And then, tonight, the drum had changed. Kaedric stood at his tower window, his hands braced against the cold stone, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The mark on his chest, a mirror to hers, burned with phantom fire. Through it, he could feel her. Fear, pain, despair, and distance. So much distance. Brennan. His voice shattered the silence like breaking glass. The door burst open and his first beta entered, already armed, already alert. Brennan had served Kaedric for 60 years, had witnessed his king's obsessive search, had never once questioned its purpose. My king, you felt something. She has been taken. Kaedric turned from the window and Brennan took an involuntary step back at what he saw in his alpha's eyes. Gold fire burned where amber should have been. The wolf was rising, barely contained by human flesh. Someone has taken her to Grimholt. Brennan's face went pale. Uldren's territory. My king, if we march on Grimholt without cause, the Council of Alphas will declare us oath-breakers. Half the realm will unite against us. Then half the realm will burn. Kaedric was already moving, strapping on weapons, pulling on armor. Mobilize everything. Every wolf who can fight. We march within the hour. My king. Brennan's voice was careful. In all these centuries, you have never found her in time. What makes this different? Kaedric paused at the door. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that were not entirely human. She has passed 20 winters. She has never survived this long before. He turned, and the gold fire in his eyes blazed brighter. Whatever has been killing her, whatever has kept us apart, it has failed. She is alive. She carries the mark. And this time, I will reach her before anyone can take her from me again. He strode into the corridor, leaving Brennan to follow. This time, the Alpha King snarled, she will be mine. Behind them, the obsidian tower began to howl with the voices of wolves answering their king's summons, and 1,000 leagues to the west, in a cell beneath the black fortress of Grimholt, Valora curled around the burning mark on her collarbone and dreamed of a man she had never met calling her by a name that was not her own. 2 months in Grimholt had taught Valora the geometry of survival. She learned which corridors to avoid after dark, which servants could be trusted, that the kitchens offered brief sanctuary, and that Uldren watched her with an obsession that grew more unsettling with each passing day. He had not touched her. That was the strangest part. The Alpha of Grimholt was not known for his restraint. His appetites were legendary, his cruelty toward those he claimed even more so. Yet he kept Valora confined to a chamber that was almost comfortable, brought her food that was almost adequate, and visited her each evening to simply stare at the crescent mark on her collarbone with an expression she could not decipher. "Do you know what you are?" he would ask, and each evening she would give the same answer. "I am no one. A girl from Sylvain sold to pay another's debt." Uldren would smile that terrible, not quite smile, and leave without another word. The mark burned constantly now. Whatever had awakened on the night of her arrival had not gone back to sleep. The silver crescent pulsed with heat that waxed and waned like the moon itself, flaring brightest in the hours before dawn. And with the burning came the dreams, a great hall filled with candlelight, a throne carved from white stone, a man whose face she could never quite see, whose voice she could never quite hear, who reached for her across an impossible distance with hands that trembled with desperate longing. Each night she drew closer to him in the dreams. Each morning she woke with tears on her face and an ache in her chest that had no name. "You are crying again." Valora startled at the voice. The servant girl who brought her morning meal stood in the doorway. Her name was Cassia, perhaps 15 winters old, with hollow cheeks and eyes that had seen too much suffering. "It is nothing." Valora wiped her face quickly. "Bad dreams." Cassia set the tray down and glanced toward the door before speaking in a low whisper. "There is news." "From outside." Valora's heart stuttered. In 2 months, she had heard nothing of the world beyond Grimholt's borders. "What news?" "A war." Cassia's voice trembled with equal parts fear and excitement. "An Alpha King from the Eastern Realms. He has been burning territories for months, they say, searching for someone." The mark on Valora's collarbone flared with sudden heat. "Searching for whom?" "A woman." Cassia leaned closer. "They say he has offered 100,000 gold pieces to anyone who can tell him where to find her. They say he has killed alphas who refuse to let his wolves search their lands. They say he is mad, driven insane by a broken bond, and that he will not stop until he finds her or burns the world to ash." Valora's hand moved to her collar, pressing against the pulsing mark beneath. "Does anyone know who this woman is?" "No one. He describes only a mark." Cassia's eyes dropped to Valora's hand, to the spot she was unconsciously pressing. "A silver crescent, here." She touched her own collarbone. The world tilted beneath Valora's feet. "When you say he has been burning territories for months?" she heard herself ask. "How many months?" "Since late autumn, they say. Since the night of the first true snowfall." The night she had been brought to Grimholt. Valora sank onto her narrow bed, her mind racing. An Alpha King searching for a woman with a silver crescent mark, offering fortunes, waging wars, burning anyone who stood in his way, looking for her. But that was impossible. She was no one. A girl from a minor territory who had never met an Alpha King, had never traveled beyond her homeland's borders until Turvin sold her to pay his debts. "There is more." Cassia's whisper had grown even softer. "They say this king is ancient, that he has lived for 300 years, that he claims to have searched for this woman across multiple lifetimes." The dreams. The man she could never quite see. The voice calling her by a name that was not her own. "What name?" Valora grabbed Cassia's wrist. "The name he calls her." "What is it?" Cassia's eyes widened at the intensity in Valora's grip. "I do not know. The traders did not say." A heavy footstep sounded in the corridor outside. Cassia tore her arm free and fled through the servants' entrance, leaving Valora alone with her racing thoughts and her burning mark and the growing certainty that everything she believed about her life had been a lie. That night, Uldren's visit was different. He entered her chamber without knocking, as always. But instead of taking his customary seat and staring at her mark with hungry patience, he strode directly to where she sat by the window and grabbed her arm with bruising force. "You have heard the news." It was not a question. About the Alpha King of Ethermore. Valora did not bother to deny it. The servants talk. Uldren's pale eyes bore into hers. "Do you know why he is searching for you?" "I do not know that he is searching for me. There must be other women with similar marks." "There are not." Uldren's grip tightened until she gasped. "The crescent mark appears once in a generation, once in a century, if the bloodlines run true. It marks the reincarnated soul of an ancient queen who died before she could complete her bond with the first Alpha King." Valora's blood ran cold. "That is a myth. A children's story." "It is history." Uldren released her arm and stepped back, his expression shifting to something almost like triumph. 3 centuries ago, King Kadric of Ethermore found his fated mate. A woman with silver eyes and a crescent mark. Before he could claim her fully, she was murdered by rivals who feared what their combined power would unleash. The name hit Valora like a physical blow. Kadric. She had heard that name before. In dreams, she could not fully remember. The king went mad with grief. Uldren continued. But instead of dying, he simply waited. Because he knew the bond was incomplete. He knew her soul would return. And for 3 centuries, he has hunted each reincarnation, trying to complete what was started so long ago. "Why are you telling me this?" Uldren's smile made her stomach turn. "Because I have waited 30 years for you, little queen. I knew you would be born eventually. I knew the mark would appear. And I made certain your uncle owed me a debt he could never repay, so that when the time came, you would be delivered directly to me." The truth crashed over Valora like an avalanche. "You planned this. All of it. Your parents died because they refused to give you up willingly. Your uncle's gambling debts were manufactured by my agents. Even the timing of your sale was calculated to occur before Kadric's wolves could reach Solvane." Uldren leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. "You are the key to unmaking the most powerful alpha in 7 realms. When I claim you, when I complete the bond that Kadric has been chasing for 3 centuries, his power will collapse, and Ethermore will fall to Grimholt without a single battle." Valora's hands curled into fists. "I will never accept your claim. You will not have a choice." Uldren straightened, his pale eyes gleaming with anticipation. "The blood moon rises in 3 nights. The old rituals require no consent. Only flesh and blood, and the mark that binds you to fate." He turned and strode toward the door. "Sleep well, little queen. Soon you will dream only of me." The door slammed shut. The lock clicked into place, and Valora pressed her back against the cold stone wall, her heart hammering, her mark burning brighter than ever, and 3 nights standing between her and a fate worse than death. Somewhere in the darkness beyond Grimholt's walls, she thought she heard wolves howling. But the sound was too distant to offer hope. On the 2nd night before the blood moon, the stranger came to her window. Valora had not slept since Uldren's revelation. She had paced her chamber until her feet ached, had torn at the walls searching for weaknesses, had screamed into her pillow until her throat burned raw. None of it mattered. The door was solid iron. The window was 40 feet above sheer rock. The servants who brought her meals would not meet her eyes. She was going to be claimed by a monster, used as a weapon against a king she had never met, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. When the tap came against the glass, she thought she had imagined it. The 2nd tap made her spin toward the window. A face stared back at her through the frost. A young man with sharp features, dark hair whipped by the wind, and amber eyes that burned with urgent intensity. He clung to the sheer tower wall with claws that should not have been possible. He gestured for her to open the window. Valora hesitated only a moment before complying. The stranger slipped through the opening with fluid grace. He was dressed in dark leather that blended with shadows. A warrior. a wolf of considerable power. And on his chest, visible through the torn collar of his shirt, was a brand that made her breath catch. A crescent moon enclosed in a circle of thorns. "You bear his mark," she whispered. "I am Corvin," the stranger replied, his voice barely audible. "Third blade of the Shadow Guard, sworn servant of Kadric, Alpha King of Ethermoor." His amber eyes held hers with fierce intensity. "I have been searching for you for 20 years, my lady, since the night your mark first called to my king across the void between lives. I do not understand any of this." "You will." Corvin moved to the door, pressing his ear against the iron, listening. "But not here. Not now. Uldren has tripled his guard since yesterday. He knows my king is close." "How close?" 3 days' march with an army. Less if he comes alone. Corvin turned back to face her. "Which is what Uldren is counting on. The blood moon ritual requires power to complete. An alpha's power. Uldren has set a trap. He will let Kadric breach Grimholt's walls, then capture him and use both of you in the ceremony." Horror flooded through Valora's veins. "He cannot know that your king is coming. Uldren has been planning this for decades. He has spies in every territory between here and Ethermoor." Corvin's jaw tightened. "We believe he is the one who has been killing you." The words made no sense. "Killing me?" "In your past lives, each reincarnation, you die before my king can reach you. Illness, accidents, assassins." Corvin's eyes darkened. "We never had proof, but who else would benefit from keeping the bond incomplete?" Valora thought of Uldren's smile, his patience, the 30 years he claimed to have waited. "He murdered me in every lifetime just so he could claim me in this one. And use that claim to destroy my king." Corvin moved toward the window. "I cannot take you from here tonight. The wards on this tower would alert every wolf in Grimholt, but I needed you to know the truth before the blood moon rises." "What truth?" Corvin paused at the window ledge, his amber eyes softening with something like reverence. "My king has loved you for 3 centuries, through 5 lifetimes of loss, through endless grief that would have broken any other wolf. He has never taken another mate, never stopped searching, never wavered in his certainty that you would return to him." Tears burned in Vylora's eyes. She did not know this king, had only fragments of dreams and a burning mark to suggest any connection. But something in her chest ached at Corvin's words. "Tomorrow night," Corvin continued, "I will return with others. We will breach the tower wards and extract you before the ceremony can begin. You must be ready to move without hesitation." "And if you cannot reach me in time?" Corvin's expression hardened. "Then my king will tear this fortress apart stone by stone. He will slaughter every wolf who stands between him and you. And if he is too late again?" His voice cracked slightly. "I do not think there will be a 6th lifetime. I think this is the last chance for both of you." He slipped through the window and vanished into the darkness. Valora stood frozen for a long moment, staring at the empty space where he had been. Then she moved to her narrow bed and pressed her hand over her burning mark. Tomorrow night. She only had to survive until tomorrow night. The door exploded inward. Uldren strode through the wreckage, his pale eyes blazing with fury, flanked by 6 wolves who moved with the coordinated precision of trained killers. "Did you think I would not smell an intruder in my own fortress?" He crossed the chamber in 3 strides and seized Valora by the throat, lifting her until her feet left the ground. "What did he tell you? What did Kadric's dog whisper in your ear?" Valora clawed at his wrist, gasping for air. "Nothing. He told me nothing." Uldren's grip tightened. Stars burst across her vision. "Lies taste different than truth, little queen. Your heart is racing. Your scent has changed. You have been given hope." His smile was a wound in his brutal face. "I will enjoy destroying that hope tomorrow night." He dropped her without warning. Valora crumpled to the floor, choking, her throat burning where his fingers had crushed. "The ceremony moves to tonight," Uldren announced to his wolves. "The blood moon rises in 6 hours. That is enough time to prepare the altar and summon the old spirits. By dawn, the bond will be complete." "No." The word tore from Vylora's ruined throat. The ritual requires power. You said so yourself. You need Kadric. Uldren laughed. A sound like breaking bones. I need an alpha's power. I have my own. He flexed his clawed fingers. It would have been sweeter to use Kadric's strength against him, to make him watch as I claimed what he has chased for centuries. But I am not a patient wolf, and your hope offends me. He turned to his men. Bind her, bring her to the altar, and triple the perimeter guard. If Kadric's wolves attempt rescue, kill them all. Rough hands seized Valora's arms. Iron manacles snapped around her wrists for the second time in 2 months. She was hauled upright and dragged toward the door, her struggles utterly useless against the strength of the wolves who held her. Her mark blazed with desperate heat, and this time she felt the presence respond. Not distant, not muted, close, so close she could almost touch it. A consciousness of overwhelming power that slammed against the edges of her awareness with the force of a battering ram. Images flooded her mind. A black wolf the size of a warhorse, running through snow. Eyes burning with centuries of longing. A voice that resonated in her bones rather than her ears. Hold on. I am coming. Hold on. She is communing with him. One of Uldren's wolves snarled the warning. Uldren spun, his hand striking Valora across the face with enough force to snap her head back. Gag her, blindfold her, and get the wolfsbane chains. The presence in her mind screamed with fury as she was silenced. They dragged her into the depths of Grimholt, down spiral stairs that had not seen torchlight in decades, into a chamber carved from living rock, where an altar of black stone waited beneath an opening in the ceiling. Through that opening, Valora could see the moon rising, red as blood, ancient as death. The blood moon had arrived. Uldren began to chant. The words were in a language Valora did not recognize, harsh syllables that scraped against her ears like broken glass. The air grew thick. Shadows deepened in the corners of the chamber. And something answered from the darkness between worlds. Power gathered around the altar. Cold and wrong and hungry, Valora's mark burned brighter than it ever had before. Even through the wolfsbane chains, even through the gag that silenced her screams, she could feel the connection to Kadric straining like a rope pulled to its breaking point. He was coming. She knew it with absolute certainty, but he would not arrive in time. Uldren ascended the altar steps, carrying a curved blade that gleamed with the same unnatural green as the torches. The blade was not meant for her. Not yet. First came the blood sacrifice, then the claiming bite, then the completion of a bond that would destroy whatever she had shared with a king she had never truly met. For 30 years, I have waited, Uldren intoned, his pale eyes fixed on her with terrible hunger. Through 3 of your lifetimes, I have watched and prepared. Do you know how difficult it is to arrange a death that appears accidental? To time the murders so precisely that Kadric always arrives just days too late? He smiled as horror dawned in her eyes. Yes, little queen, I killed you. Again and again. The fever that took you in your second life. That was my poison in your village's well. The carriage accident in your third life. My wolves spooked those horses. The fire in your fourth life, and the assassin's blade in your fifth. He laughed softly. All me. All waiting for this perfect convergence of circumstances. The chanting grew louder. The power in the chamber pressed against Valora's chest until she could barely breathe. And now, finally, you have lived long enough. The crescent mark has reached its full potency. When I claim you tonight, I will not just complete the bond. I will steal the power that should have been Kadric's. 3 centuries of accumulated strength transferred to me in a single moment. He raised the ceremonial blade, and the ceiling exploded. Stone and snow and screaming wolves cascaded into the chamber as something massive descended through the opening that had shown the blood moon. A shape of shadow and fury, claws like swords, eyes like twin suns burning with 3 centuries of rage. Kadric had arrived. His wolf form was nothing like the stories described, nothing like anything Valora had imagined. He was terror given flesh, death wearing fur. An apex predator beyond any classification, his power so vast it made the air itself tremble. He landed on the altar with a crash that shattered the black stone. Uldren screamed an order, his wolves surged forward. They died. Kadric moved through them like a scythe through wheat. Claws opened throats, jaws crushed skulls, bodies flew in all directions, broken and lifeless before they hit the ground. In the space of 6 heartbeats, 12 wolves became corpses. Uldren scrambled backward, his pale eyes wide with something Velora had never seen in them before. Fear. "You cannot interfere with a blood moon ritual!" Uldren shrieked. "The old laws forbid it." The massive black wolf stalked toward him, gore dripping from its muzzle, its burning gaze fixed on Uldren with the focused intensity of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. It spoke without speaking. A voice that resonated in the bones of everyone present. "You murdered her. 5 times. You stole her from me across 5 lifetimes." Uldren's back hit the chamber wall. There was nowhere left to run. The old laws speak of justice for such crimes. The black wolf lunged. Velora closed her eyes against what followed. The sounds were enough, wet and final, and entirely deserved. When she opened them again, Uldren was gone. The chamber was painted in crimson, and a man stood where the wolf had been, his dark hair matted with blood, his chest heaving, his gaze locked on her with an expression that broke through every wall she had built around her heart. "Velora," he breathed, her true name, the name she had been given at birth. But that was not what made her knees buckle. It was the second name that followed. The name he whispered as he crossed the distance between them with trembling steps. The name that belonged to a woman who had died 300 years ago in his arms. Lyrelai. The name from her dreams. The name that echoed in her soul as if it had always lived there. The name of who she had been when they first found each other. And as Kadric's hands cupped her face with impossible gentleness, as his forehead pressed against hers, as 3 centuries of longing finally met their ending, Velora remembered everything. The memories came like a flood breaking through a dam. Velora gasped as images crashed through her mind. Not fragments this time, not half-glimpsed dreams that dissolved upon waking. These were complete, vivid, devastating in their clarity. She saw herself in a white gown, standing before an altar of pale stone, while a younger Kadric took her hands in his. Lyrelai. That had been her name then. Daughter of the Moon Priestesses, chosen by fate to complete the bond that would unite the fractured wolf kingdoms under one rule. She saw the assassin's blade as it pierced her chest from behind, felt the cold shock of steel between her ribs, watched Kadric's face transform from joy to horror in the space between heartbeats, heard his scream as she crumpled into his arms, her blood soaking his ceremonial robes. She saw the fever that claimed her second life. A child of 7 winters, burning alive from the inside while her parents wept at her bedside. She had not known Kadric then, had not remembered anything of her first existence, but she remembered now the shadow at her window, the wolf with pale eyes who had watched her die with satisfaction, Uldren. She saw the carriage accident, the fire, the assassin's blade in an alley behind a tavern where she had worked as a serving girl. Each death more brutal than the last, each lifetime shorter than the one before. And through it all, the distant sense of someone searching, someone calling, someone who never stopped trying to reach her. Velora. Kadric's voice pulled her back to the present. His hands still cupped her face, his thumbs brushing tears she had not realized she was shedding. "Stay with me. Do not get lost in what was. You searched for 3 centuries. The words emerged broken. You found me dying. Over and over. And you never stopped." I could not stop. His gaze held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "You are the other half of my soul. Every moment of every lifetime, I have felt the incompleteness. The wound where you should have been. Stopping was never possible. But the pain," Velora's voice cracked. "Each time you found me too late. Each time you had to watch me die again. How did you survive that?" I did not survive it. I endured it. Kadrick's jaw tightened. There is a difference. Survival implies healing. I have not healed in all these centuries. I have simply continued to exist, waiting for the moment when existing could finally become living. His forehead pressed against hers again, and she felt the bond between them pulse with desperate warmth. Not complete, not yet, but closer than it had ever been across 5 lifetimes of separation. I dreamed of you, Valora whispered, in this life. Before I knew who you were, you called my name across distances I could not comprehend, and I wanted to answer. Every night I wanted to answer, but I did not know how. Your mark called to mine. Kadrick's hand moved to her collarbone, his fingers tracing the silver crescent with reverent gentleness. Even suppressed by Uldren's wards, even silenced by wolfsbane chains, the bond recognized itself across 1,000 leagues. I thought I was going mad, dreaming of a man I had never met, feeling grief for losses I could not remember. Valora laughed bitterly. I was grieving us. All the lives we should have shared, all the moments that were stolen. Kadrick pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her with fierce protectiveness. She felt his heart hammering beneath her cheek, felt the tremors running through his massive frame. The Alpha King of Ethermore, terror of 7 realms, was shaking like a leaf in her embrace. I have imagined this moment for so long, he murmured against her hair. Holding you, speaking to you, feeling you alive and warm and real. I convinced myself it would never happen, that the universe would find some new way to tear you from me. Uldren is dead. Uldren was a pawn. Kadrick's arms tightened. He was not clever enough to orchestrate something of this magnitude across 3 centuries. Someone taught him the rituals. Someone told him where to find you in each lifetime. Someone wanted us separated badly enough to invest decades of planning into each murder. A chill ran down Valora's spine. Who? I do not know. I have spent 200 years trying to identify them. Every trail leads to dead ends. Every witness conveniently dies before I can question them. He pulled back to look into her eyes. But they are still out there. And when they learn that Uldren has failed, they will try again. Then we complete the bond. Valora's voice held a certainty she had not known she possessed. Now, tonight. Before anyone else can interfere. Something flickered in Kadrick's expression. Hunger and hope and a caution that surprised her. The bond cannot be completed here. Not properly. The claiming requires sacred ground, witnessed by Pack and blessed by the old spirits. He gestured at the blood-soaked chamber around them. This place is tainted. The blood moon ritual Uldren attempted has corrupted the very stones. If we tried to complete the bond in this darkness, it could twist into something neither of us would survive. Then take me to sacred ground. Take me to Ethermore. That is exactly what I intend. Kadrick stepped back and extended his hand. My wolves are holding the perimeter. We ride within the hour. Valora took his hand. The moment their fingers interlaced, the bond surged between them. Not painful this time. Glorious. A rush of warmth and belonging that filled the hollow spaces she had carried since childhood, without understanding why. Through the connection, she felt his emotions as clearly as her own. Centuries of loneliness, finally acknowledging the possibility of ending. Love so vast it defied description. And beneath it all, a fear he would never admit aloud. Fear that something would tear them apart before they could complete what had begun 300 years ago. I am not leaving you, Valora said, answering the fear he had not spoken. 5 lifetimes they have stolen from us. They will not take a 6th. Kadrick's expression shifted. The guarded hope in his eyes blazed into something brighter. Something that looked almost like faith. When this is over, he said softly, when the bond is complete and our enemies are ash, I am going to spend every remaining moment of this existence making you understand how much I love you. Valora's breath caught. You love me? You do not even know me. Not in this life. I have known you across 5 lifetimes. Kadric raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent fire racing through her veins. I know the courage that drives you to protect others before yourself. I know the compassion that makes you weep for strangers. I know the fierce spirit that refuses to break no matter what horrors are inflicted upon it. His burning gaze held hers with fierce intensity. I have watched you die 5 times, Valora, and in each lifetime, no matter how brief, you showed me who you truly are. That woman has been the only thing keeping me sane for all these centuries. He smiled, and it transformed his blood-spattered face into something almost gentle. So yes, I love you. I have loved you since the moment our souls first recognized each other. I will love you until the stars themselves burn out. Valora had no words. She answered him with a kiss instead. The moment their lips met, the bond between them ignited like oil thrown on flames. Valora felt her consciousness expand, merging with his in ways she could not fully comprehend. Past lives flickered through her awareness. Their first dance in that great hall of white stone, whispered promises in moonlit gardens. The desperate final moments when she had died in his arms and felt his soul screaming alongside hers. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Sacred ground, Kedrick managed, his voice rough. Now, before I lose all restraint and complete this bond in a blood-soaked dungeon. They climbed from the ruined chamber hand in hand, stepping over bodies without a second glance. The spiral stairs seemed endless, but Valora barely noticed. Her entire being was focused on the warmth of Kadrick's hand in hers. They emerged into the fortress courtyard to find chaos. Kadrick's wolves had secured the perimeter, but something was wrong. Corvin ran toward them, his dark hair wild and his amber eyes blazing with alarm. My king! Riders approaching from the east. Hundreds of them. They carry the banner of House Thornwell. Kadrick's face hardened. Uldren's allies. There is more. Corvin's voice dropped. We captured one of Uldren's lieutenants before he could flee. Under questioning, he revealed that Uldren was not working alone. House Thornwell has been coordinating the interference across all 5 lifetimes. Their matriarch, the Lady Sylvain, she is the one who taught Uldren the blood moon rituals. Valora felt the blood drain from her face. She is the architect behind everything. And she is riding here now with an army at her back. Corvin's jaw tightened. She must have received word that the ritual failed. She is coming to finish what Uldren started. Kedrick's growl resonated through the courtyard. How many wolves do we have? 43, my king. We rode light for speed. And she brings hundreds. Kadrick turned to look at the horizon, where distant torches flickered like malevolent stars. We cannot fight those numbers, not here. Not with Valora unprotected. The tunnels beneath Grimholt, Corvin said quickly. They connect to the old mining passages that run beneath the mountains. We could reach the border of Ethermoor in 2 days. She would simply follow, hunt us across the mountains until we were cornered or exhausted. Kadrick's hand tightened around Valora's. No, we need time. Time to complete the bond. Time to unite our power. Valora looked at the approaching torches, at the army riding to claim her for another monstrous ritual, at the wolves around her who had searched for decades, who had finally found her, who were now facing annihilation because they refused to let her go. The choice formed in her mind with terrible clarity. There is another option. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Calm, certain. She wants me. Give her what she wants. Kadrick spun to face her. Absolutely not. Listen to me. Valora stepped closer, gripping his hands. If I go to her willingly, she will have no reason to attack your wolves. She will take me back to House Thornwell for whatever ritual she has planned. That gives you time to regroup, to gather reinforcements, to bring an army that can actually match hers. You would have me let you walk into the hands of the woman who has been murdering you for 3 centuries? Kadrick's voice broke with anguish. Valora, I cannot. I will not. You have spent 3 centuries arriving too late. She cupped his face in her hands, mirroring the gesture he had used to bring her back from the flood of memories. This time, I am choosing to give you the time you need. This time, you will arrive with an army. This time, we end this properly. And if she kills you before I can reach you? Valora smiled, though tears streamed down her face. Then you find me in the next life, just as you always have. Kadric made a sound that was half growl, half sob. He crushed her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. I have loved you through 5 deaths, he whispered against her hair. I do not know if I can survive a 6th. You will not have to. Valora pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. I am not the same woman who died in those other lifetimes. I have her memories now. I know what is coming, and I will fight to survive until you reach me. She kissed him one final time. A promise, a prayer, a goodbye that she desperately hoped was temporary. Then she turned and walked toward the approaching army. Kedric's howl of anguish split the night behind her, a sound of grief so profound that wolves across the realm lifted their heads in shared sorrow. But he did not follow. He let her go. Because after 3 centuries of loss, he finally understood that some sacrifices were not his to make. Lady Selvain of House Thornwell was everything Uldren had aspired to be. Where his cruelty had been blunt and obvious, hers was refined. Where his ambition had been transparent, hers was concealed beneath layers of silk and false courtesy. She received Valora in a tent of crimson velvet, seated on a throne that traveled with her army, her silver hair arranged in elaborate coils that must have taken hours to perfect. So this is the soul that has evaded us for 3 centuries. Selvain's voice was musical, almost pleasant. You are prettier in this incarnation than you were in the last. The serving girl had such unfortunate features. Valora stood with her wrists bound before her, surrounded by guards who watched her with hungry anticipation. She said nothing. The walk from Grimholt to the army's position had given her time to think, time to plan, time to remember everything Lyrelay had known about power and politics and the ancient rituals that wolves used to claim their mates. No defiance? No declarations of how your beloved king will rescue you? Selvain rose from her throne and circled Valora with predatory grace. Uldren wrote to me about your spirit. He seemed quite impressed by your refusal to break. I confess, I expected more fire. Fire serves no purpose here. Valora's voice was flat. You have already won. Selvain's laugh was like breaking crystal. How refreshingly practical. Though I suspect that calm acceptance is merely a performance. You are stalling for time, hoping Kadric will arrive with reinforcements before I can complete what Uldren failed to accomplish. Will he not? Perhaps. If I give him the opportunity? Selvain's smile showed teeth. But I have been orchestrating this game for 3 centuries, child. I did not invest generations of planning into a scheme that could be undone by a simple rescue. She gestured, and guards forced Valora to her knees. Do you want to know why I have done this? Selvain knelt before her, bringing their faces level. Why I have murdered you across 5 lifetimes. Why I have invested more time and resources into separating you from Kadric than most wolves invest in their entire dynasties? Power. Valora met her silver eyes without flinching. Kadric's power. The same reason Uldren wanted to claim me. Uldren was a fool who understood nothing. Contempt dripped from Selvain's words. He thought he could simply steal Kadric's strength by completing a blood moon ritual, as if power of that magnitude could be transferred like coins changing hands. Then what do you want? Selvain leaned closer, her breath warm against Valora's cheek. I want what should have been mine 3 centuries ago. I was Kedric's betrothed before you existed. Before your precious Lyrelay appeared with her crescent mark and her moon priestess bloodline and her fated bond that superseded every political arrangement in 7 realms. Hatred blazed behind Selvain's cultured facade. I was meant to be queen. I was meant to rule beside him. And then a nobody with silver eyes destroyed everything. The truth hit Valora like a physical blow. You hired the assassin, The one who killed Lyreley at the bonding ceremony. Hired him. Trained him. Positioned him perfectly. Sylvain rose, her silk skirts rustling. And when Kaedric refused to accept her death, when he declared he would wait for her soul to return rather than complete his bond with me, I realized that killing her once would never be enough. So you killed me again. And again. And again. Each time hoping Kaedric would finally give up. Finally accept that fate was not on his side. Finally take me as his mate and make me the queen I was born to be. Sylvain's mask cracked, revealing the obsession beneath. But he never stopped searching, never stopped believing. All these centuries, and he has never so much as looked at another woman. Because the bond does not lie. Valora found her voice strengthening despite her position. He loves me, not because of politics or duty, because our souls recognized each other. Sylvain's hand cracked across her face with enough force to split her lip. Your soul can be reborn in a different body, Sylvain hissed. It has happened 5 times already. When I kill you tonight, it will happen again. But this time, I will be ready. This time I will find you in infancy and raise you myself. Mold you. Shape you into a vessel I control completely. Horror flooded through Valora's veins. You would steal a child. I would claim what was stolen from me. Sylvain straightened, composing herself. And by the time Kaedric finds you in your 7th life, you will be bonded to me. You will be my weapon. And together, we will finally destroy the king who rejected me for a ghost. Guards hauled Valora to her feet. Take her to the ritual site, Sylvain commanded. The blood moon has passed, but the old magics can be invoked through other means. By dawn, her soul will be untethered and sent screaming into the void, and I will be waiting on the other side to catch it. They dragged her through the army encampment. Valora searched desperately for any opportunity to escape. Any weakness in her guards? There was nothing. The ritual site was a clearing ringed by ancient stones carved with symbols that made her eyes ache. A stone slab waited at the center, its surface stained dark with old blood. Torches burned at the cardinal points, their flames an unnatural shade of green. They bound her to the slab with chains that burned against her skin. Wolfsbane, she realized, woven into the metal itself. Her mark blazed with desperate heat, and through the bond she felt Kaedric's answering fury. He was coming. She could feel him racing across the frozen landscape with every wolf he could muster. But he was still hours away. Too far. Sylvain approached the altar, carrying a curved blade that gleamed with the same unnatural green as the torches. The ritual requires your willing death. A soul released voluntarily transcends faster than one torn free by force. I will never cooperate willingly. No? Sylvain smiled. Bring them. Guards dragged forward a line of prisoners Valora had not seen before. Servants from Grimholt, she realized, the ones who had shown her small kindnesses during her captivity. Cassia was among them, her thin face streaked with tears. For each moment you resist, Sylvain said pleasantly, I will kill one of them, starting with the child. Cassia's eyes met Valora's, wide with terror. Please. The girl's voice trembled. Please, my lady, do not let them hurt me. Valora's heart crumbled. She thought of Kaedric racing toward her, thought of the bond they had almost completed. But she also thought of Lyreley, a woman who had valued the lives of others above her own safety, a woman who would never have watched innocent children die to buy herself more time. Wait. The word tore from her throat. Wait. I will cooperate. Sylvain's smile widened. I knew you would see reason. But not for the ritual you have planned. Valora's voice strengthened as something ancient and powerful stirred in her chest. Lyreley was a moon priestess before she was Kaedric's mate. She knew rituals too. Rituals that have been buried in my memories across 5 lifetimes, waiting for the moment I would need them. Sylvain's expression flickered with uncertainty. You are bluffing. The old magics require willing participation. You said so yourself. Valora closed her eyes and reached deep into the memories that flooded through her awareness. Past the deaths, past the grief, past 5 lifetimes of fear and loss. She reached for the power that Lirale had possessed. The crescent mark on her collarbone ignited with silver fire. The chains binding her to the altar began to smoke. Sylvain screamed for her guards to intervene, but they could not approach. The silver fire spread outward from Vylora's body, forming a protective barrier that forced everyone back. All these centuries, Valora said, and her voice carried harmonics that resonated with frequencies beyond human hearing. All this time you have hunted me, killed me, stolen my lives before I could complete the bond that would have stopped you. The stone slab beneath her cracked. But you made a mistake, Sylvain. You let me live long enough to remember. And Lirale remembered everything. The chains broke apart. Valora rose from the altar, silver fire cascading from her body like water. The ancient stones around the clearing began to hum with sympathetic resonance. Power older than any living wolf awakened at her call. Sylvain drew her ceremonial blade and charged. The knife plunged toward Valora's heart. Valora caught the blade with her bare hand. Silver blood, luminescent and strange, welled from where the edge bit into her palm. But she did not flinch, did not falter. The fire in her eyes blazed brighter than any torch. The moon priestesses were not simply Kaedric's allies, Valora said softly. They were the source of his power. The bond between us was meant to unite 2 ancient bloodlines, human and wolf, mortal and eternal. She pushed back against the blade, forcing Sylvain to stumble. For 3 centuries, that power has been accumulating, waiting, growing stronger with each death, each rebirth, and each failure to complete what should have been finished. The silver fire spread across the clearing, encircling the hostages in protective warmth while pressing against Sylvain's wolves with scorching heat. You wanted power? Valora's voice rose. You wanted to be queen? This is what you would have faced if you had ever actually succeeded in bonding with Kaedric. This is what the Moon Priestess bloodline truly holds. She released the blade and raised her arms. The fire exploded upward, forming a pillar of silver light that pierced the clouds above. For 100 leagues in every direction, wolves lifted their heads as ancient power announced itself to the world. And racing across the frozen plains, his wolf form covering ground at impossible speed, Kaedric felt his mate's awakening like a second sunrise in his chest. She was alive. She was fighting. And she had become something magnificent. Sylvain's wolves fled. They could not withstand the silver fire that poured from Valora's transformed body. The heat drove them back, sent them scrambling for the edges of the clearing, forced them to choose between their lady's commands and their own survival. Most chose survival. But Sylvain herself did not retreat. 3 centuries of obsession had burned away any capacity for surrender. She circled Vylora with her ceremonial blade raised, her silver hair wild, and her cultured mask finally broken to reveal the madness beneath. You think this changes anything? Sylvain's shriek echoed off the ancient stones. I have killed you 5 times. I will kill you 100 more. Eventually your soul will break. Eventually, you will be mine to mold. Valora turned to face her, and the movement sent ripples of silver light cascading across the clearing. The power flowing through her was almost too vast to contain. She could feel it pressing against the boundaries of her flesh, demanding release. You do not understand what you have done, Valora said. Her voice resonated with harmonics from 5 lifetimes. Each time you killed me, the power I carried did not simply transfer to the next life, it accumulated. She raised her palm, and the silver fire condensed into a sphere of blinding intensity. 5 lifetimes of Moon Priestess magic, 5 deaths that should have destroyed something irreplaceable. Instead, you created a vessel strong enough to hold it all. Sylvain's eyes widened with sudden understanding and fear. Kill her! She screamed at the wolves who still lingered at the clearing's edge. Kill her now, before she fully awakens. A handful of loyal wolves charged forward. Valora extended her free hand, and the silver fire lashed out in controlled arcs. The wolves collapsed unconscious, their bodies incapacitated by power they could not comprehend. "I am not like you," Valora said softly. "I do not kill for convenience or spite." Those wolves were following orders. Their deaths would serve no purpose. She began walking toward Sylvain, each step leaving prints of fading silver light on the frozen ground. "But you, Sylvain, you have orchestrated 3 centuries of murder and suffering. You have torn apart families, destroyed kingdoms, killed children." Valora's voice hardened. "For you, there will be no mercy." Sylvain lunged with her ceremonial blade, a desperate final attack. Valora caught the blade with her bare hand. Again. Silver blood welled from the wound, but this time the fire in her palm melted the weapon itself, reducing centuries of scheming to slag that dripped through her fingers. She seized Sylvain's throat with her other hand. "You want to know what true power feels like?" Valora lifted the older woman until her feet left the ground. "You have spent 3 centuries chasing it. Let me show you what you could never have claimed." Silver fire poured into Sylvain's body, not killing, not directly. The Moon Priestess magic did not destroy. It revealed. Sylvain screamed as 3 centuries of accumulated karma crashed through her awareness. Every death she had orchestrated. Every innocent she had destroyed. She felt all of it at once. Valora held her suspended for 10 heartbeats, 20, 30. Then she released her grip. Sylvain crumpled to the frozen ground, her silver hair now white, her face aged decades in moments, her eyes staring at nothing. She was not dead, but she would never be a threat again. Valora stood over her defeated enemy, the silver fire slowly banking to a gentle glow. Behind her, she heard the hostages stirring. Cassia's voice rose in wondering amazement. "My lady? What happened? What are you?" Valora turned to face them. In the silver light of her own magic, she could see their awestruck expressions, their fear and hope warring with confusion. "I am what I was always meant to become," she said softly. "What 5 lifetimes of suffering finally forged." A howl split the dawn. Valora's heart leaped as she recognized the voice. She turned toward the eastern horizon where the first rays of true sunrise were painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Kaedric emerged from the tree line at the head of an army. His wolf form was massive and terrible, but he shifted even as he ran, his body flowing from beast to man without breaking stride. His gaze found hers across the battlefield of fallen wolves and smoking ground, and the relief in his expression swept away her composure completely. She ran to meet him. They collided in the center of the clearing, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength, her face pressing against his chest as sobs tore from her throat. The bond between them pulsed with overwhelming intensity, demanding completion, screaming for the joining that had been denied across 3 centuries. "You are alive." Kaedric's voice broke on the words. "When I felt your power awakening, when I saw the pillar of light, I thought, I was afraid." I remembered. Valora pulled back to look at his face. Everything Lirelai knew. Everything the Moon Priestesses passed down through generations. It was always inside me, just waiting to be unlocked. Kedric's hands cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "You are magnificent. In every lifetime, you have been extraordinary. But this..." His voice trailed off, choked with emotion. "The bond," Valora said. "We need to complete it. Now. Before anything else can go wrong. Here?" Kaedric looked around at the ritual site, at the fallen wolves, at the ruined altar. "The magic here is corrupted." "Not anymore." Valora took his hand and placed it over the crescent mark on her collarbone. "The silver fire has cleansed this place, burned away everything dark. What remains is sacred ground once more." She could feel him trembling beneath her touch. Centuries of longing. 5 lifetimes of loss. And now, finally, the possibility of completion. "I do not know if I can survive feeling that hope," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. If something goes wrong again, if someone finds a way to tear you from me after we have come so close, nothing will go wrong. Valora guided his hand to the pulse point at her throat. Feel my heartbeat. Feel our bond. We are stronger now than we have ever been. No one will separate us again. Kadric closed his eyes, letting her heartbeat resonate through his palm. Slowly, his trembling eased. When he opened his eyes again, they blazed with gold fire and absolute certainty. Then let it be done. He tilted his head, baring the unmarked skin where his neck met his shoulder. The ancient gesture of a wolf offering himself to his mate. Claim me, he said, as I claimed you 3 centuries ago. Complete the circle. Valora rose on her toes, bringing her lips to the offered flesh. She felt her own teeth sharpening, felt the moon priestess power guiding her movements with instinctive precision. She bit down. The bond exploded into completion. 3 centuries of accumulated emotion crashed through both of them simultaneously. Valora gasped against his throat as his memories flooded her awareness. Not just the grief and loss she had expected, not just the centuries of searching. She felt his love, vast beyond comprehension, deeper than any ocean. A devotion that had never wavered through 5 lifetimes of heartbreak. He had loved her as Lyrelei, with the desperate passion of first recognition. He had loved her in every incarnation, brief though they were, treasuring each moment until the next death tore them apart. And she felt him receiving her memories in return. The confusion of lives half remembered, the loneliness of existing without understanding why she felt incomplete. The dreams of a man calling across impossible distances, the terror of Grimholt, the agony of Uldren's threats, the desperate hope when Corvin appeared at her window. The moment she had first seen Kadric's wolf form descending through the blood moon and felt her soul recognize its other half. They broke apart gasping, their foreheads pressed together, their bodies shaking with the force of complete union. The mark on Valora's collarbone blazed silver. An answering mark on Kadric's throat glowed gold. Between them, where the colors met, a bond stronger than death itself sealed into permanent existence. I can feel you, Kadric breathed. Truly feel you, not just echoes, not just fragments, all of you. And I feel you. Tears streamed down Vylora's face, but they were tears of joy. All of that searching, all of that love, all of it, pouring through me. We are one, Kadric whispered. Finally, after everything, we are one. Behind them, Kadric's army had formed a protective ring around the clearing. Even Corvin, who had served Kadric for 60 years, stood frozen in awe. The sun broke fully above the horizon. And in the center of it all, the Alpha King of Ethermoor held his finally, completely, eternally claimed mate against his heart. The cycle that had tormented them for 3 centuries was finally broken. They were together. They were whole. And nothing would ever separate them again. The trials of House Thornwell lasted 3 days. Kadric had wanted to execute every wolf who had served Sylvain's conspiracy. Valora had counseled a different approach. In the end, they compromised in a way that satisfied justice without drowning their new reign in blood. The wolves who had simply followed orders were given a choice: swear binding oaths to the United Crown and serve a decade of penance, or face exile to the frozen wastes beyond the northern mountains. Most chose to swear. The inner circle, those who had known about the murders and participated willingly, faced harsher judgment. Execution was reserved for the worst offenders. Valora did not watch those executions. She had seen enough death across 5 lifetimes. Instead, she stood at the window of the obsidian tower in Ethermoor, her hand resting on her belly, and felt the new life growing within her. Twins. The healers had confirmed it that morning, a boy and a girl, due to arrive with the autumn harvest. Kadric found her there as the sun began to set. He moved silently, but she felt him through the bond long before his arms wrapped around her from behind. The trials are complete, he murmured against her hair. Sylvain has been confined to the Void Tower. She will live out her remaining years in isolation, attended only by wolves sworn to silence. Her mind is too broken for execution, but she will never harm anyone again. Valora leaned back against his chest. And her allies? Those who earned death have received it. Those who can be redeemed will have the chance to prove themselves. His hands moved to cover hers where they rested on her belly. Our children will inherit a kingdom free of the shadows that haunted us. Our children. The words still sent wonder cascading through her heart. For so long she had believed herself alone, a nobody sold to monsters, a woman with strange dreams and a burning mark she did not understand. Now she was queen of 7 realms, mate to the most powerful alpha in living memory. Mother to heirs who would carry the combined bloodlines of wolf kings and moon priestesses. I still cannot quite believe it, she admitted. Sometimes I wake in the night, certain I will find myself back in that cell beneath Grimholt. Certain all of this was just another dream. Kaedric turned her gently to face him. His gaze held hers with fierce intensity. This is real, he said. You are real. Our bond is real. And I will spend every day of our existence proving it to you, until you never doubt again. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Through the bond, she felt his emotions as clearly as her own, the wonder that still caught him off guard each morning, the fierce protectiveness, the deep love that would sustain them both through whatever challenges lay ahead. The coronation is tomorrow, he said when they finally broke apart. The packs are gathering from every territory. They wish to see their new queen. They wish to see the woman who wielded silver fire and defeated Sylvain's army single-handedly. Valora smiled wryly. I suspect I have become something of a legend in the past weeks. You have been a legend for 3 centuries, the fated mate, the lost queen, the soul that kept returning no matter how many times death claimed her. Kaedric's thumb traced the crescent mark on her collarbone, now permanently intertwined with a golden sun that matched his own marking. Now you are simply a legend they can finally see with their own eyes. The coronation ceremony filled the great hall of Aethermoor with more wolves than had gathered in living memory. They came from every territory, from the frozen north and the temperate south, from mountain strongholds and coastal villages, all of them united by a single purpose: to witness the completion of what should have happened 3 centuries ago. Valora stood before the white stone throne, dressed in silver and gold, her dark hair crowned with a circlet of moonstone and amber. The pregnancy was just beginning to show, a gentle curve beneath the flowing fabric of her gown. Beside her, Kaedric stood in ceremonial armor, his expression fierce with pride. The high priestess of the Moon Temple, the first to hold that title in 3 centuries, stepped forward to perform the ancient rites. She was young, barely 20 winters, but she carried herself with the weight of restored tradition. 3 centuries ago, a bond was interrupted. The priestess intoned. A queen was murdered. A king was left incomplete. And the realms suffered for the absence of their rightful rulers. She raised her hands, and silver light bloomed between her palms. Today, we restore what was broken. We complete what was interrupted. We welcome home the soul that never stopped fighting to return. The light expanded, washing over Valora and Kaedric in waves of warmth. Valora, once Lyralai, bearer of the crescent mark, vessel of moon priestess power, do you accept your place as queen of Aethermoor and all allied realms? I accept. Valora's voice rang clear through the hushed hall. Kaedric, Alpha King, seeker across lifetimes, guardian of the incomplete bond. Do you present this woman as your true mate, your equal in all things, your partner in rule and in life? I present her. Kaedric's voice carried harmonics of barely contained emotion. As I would have presented her 3 centuries ago, had fate not been twisted by those who feared what we would become together. The priestess produced 2 crowns, one of silver, set with moonstones, one of gold, set with amber. She placed the silver crown upon Valora's head and the gold upon Kaedric's. Then by the ancient laws of bond and blood, by the power vested in the Moon Temple restored, by the will of the Pax assembled, I proclaim you King and Queen of the United Realms." The priestess stepped back, her young face shining with tears. "What was broken is mended, what was lost is found, what was stolen has been reclaimed." She raised her voice to fill the hall. "Long live the king, long live the queen, long live the heirs they carry." The response shook the very stones of the ancient fortress. Thousands of voices raised in unified howl. Valora felt the combined strength of Wolf King and Moon Priestess flowing through her, finally united as it was always meant to be. She turned to Kadric, and his gaze met hers with profound love. "We did it," she whispered. "After everything. We finally did it." "No." Kadric took her hand and raised it to his lips. "You did it. You survived when lesser souls would have surrendered. You remembered when memory was supposed to be impossible." He pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "I merely searched. You were the one who refused to let death keep us apart." The celebration continued through the night. Wolves danced and howled their joy to the heavens. Alliances strained for generations were renewed. Old grudges set aside in the face of new hope, and through it all, Valora remained at Kadric's side. His hand never left hers. Centuries of vigilance had become devotion, and he would spend every moment proving the search had been worth it. When autumn came, the twins arrived with the harvest moon. A boy with his father's eyes and his mother's dark hair. A girl with silver eyes like Lyreli's, and a crescent mark that appeared on her tiny collarbone the moment she drew her first breath. Kadric wept when he held them for the first time. Valora watched through exhausted tears as the most powerful alpha in 7 realms trembled at the weight of 2 small bodies in his arms. "They are perfect," he managed, his voice breaking. "Valora, they are absolutely perfect." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the mark on his throat that matched her own. "They are ours," she said softly. "The children we should have had 3 centuries ago. The family that was stolen from us over and over." "And now?" Valora smiled, feeling the bond pulse between them with warmth and joy and absolute certainty. "Now we raise them in peace. Now we rule together as we were always meant to. Now we live the lifetime that 5 deaths could not prevent." Kadric leaned down to press his forehead against hers, their children cradled between them. "I love you," he whispered. "Across every lifetime, through every death, beyond every obstacle that tried to keep us apart. I have loved you for 3 centuries, and I will love you for 3 centuries more." "Only 3 centuries?" Valora's smile widened. "I was hoping for eternity." Kadric laughed, a sound of pure joy that she had never heard from him before. A sound the bond told her he had not made in all those centuries. "Eternity then," he agreed. "Every moment of every day for the rest of existence, together." Outside their window, the wolves of Ethermore lifted their voices in celebration. The twins stirred at the sound, their tiny faces turning toward the howls with instinctive recognition. And in the great tapestry of the realm's history, a new chapter was woven. The story of a woman sold to monsters who became a queen. Of a king who searched across lifetimes and finally found his home. Of a bond that death itself could not sever. They had been torn apart by hatred and obsession. They had found each other through courage and faith. And now, finally, completely, eternally, they would never be parted again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.